Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
And welcome back, everybody. There are many things that we all go through, and there's many things that can be used to help you heal through some of those things. Of course, modern medicine is one of them. There's also holistic healing for more natural approach. There's also something called energy healing arts. And it is an art with so many different modalities, and she practices many of them from hypnotherapy, past life regression, uh, on and on, mediumship, me, and so much more. We're going to talk with her today and learn more about that. Tatiana Mihowich is joining us here today on the program. How you doing today?
I'm great, Steve. Thanks. How are you doing?
I'm well. I'm well. Good
Great.
having you here. And there's a lot you do in helping people essentially heal from a trauma or traumas in their life. And we've talked about traumas here before, but I guess we should reset to explain what a trauma is because it's a very powerful word. When somebody hears that, they might think of a car accident or passing of a loved one, but not necessarily. It could be something that maybe was smaller, but turned into a bigger thing as life goes on. You become an adult, right?
Yeah, I believe a trauma is basically a shock to the system, and it sort of rejigs your cells and your consciousness. And so you have to adapt to an imprint.
How do you pick which modality to use to help somebody out?
I basically consult with them first, and we sort of intuit what would be the best application towards how they want to approach it and release it or transform it.
You practice hypnotherapy, and personally, that was a game changer in my life. And so many people are afraid to even go down the hypnotherapy road because they're afraid that a hypnotist can uh, control your mind, make you do things you don't want to do. I would love to dispel a lot of that there today. All of that's not true, right?
It's not true. In a way, everything is hypnotism because it requires a certain minute attention span to interact with it, and anything can mesmerize you. And hypnotism, it basically relaxes your frontal thinking so that you are more sensory, and it is much more powerful to suggest things. But I also think Hollywood has played around with the sort of phenomenon of it as being something, very theatrical and feared. Um, when in fact it's actually an incredibly powerful method of reprogramming your unconscious and your subconscious. And I think that's potentially very profound, and um, it could be threatening.
Mm. I've often heard that we're in a hypnotic state many times during the day, but we're not aware. Like right before you go to sleep, right before you fall asleep, you're in a hypnotic state. You're driving down the road or going to work, and you turn around like, how'd I get here? I don't remember driving here. Like, yeah, I zoned out. Yeah, if a car jammed on its brake in front of you, you would be fine. You'd stop your vehicle. It's all good. But somehow you zoned into a hypnotic state. Is that did I hear that right? That you really are in those states of hypnotism?
I do believe that you are, and your imagination, and again, your subconscious, your imagination, going down a couple of gears is, kind of a receptive state. And you're much more open to suggestion or to impressions. So yeah, I would agree.
I'm glad you said that, Tatiana, because that is really what's going on. And I'm going to try and explain this for the person that doesn't know hypnotherapy. You tell me if I'm right. So this is coming from a non-clinical, non-expert view, but you help somebody Yeah, basically give them the keys to their mind so that they can be more open to receiving suggestion to change their life. What is that suggestion? Stopping smoking, if that's your goal. Losing weight, if that's your goal. Not having a fear of getting on an airplane, if that's your goal. You're helping somebody do that. However, somebody's not going to do something that they don't want to. So, for example, you can't turn around and say, all right, now that I've got you in this state, give me your social security number. Hand over your wallet. If I don't want to do that, I'm not doing that. It's not going to happen. It's physically impossible. Is that reasonable? Just the way I presented that?
No, it's actually not reasonable. It can, in fact, occur. And again, it comes down to integrity. It comes down to, being very resonant with anybody that you're going to allow to have access to that part of you. And it also needs to be assessed as to how this process can be the most effective for that person.
But you need to want to make the change. For example, somebody can't call you up and say, "Yeah, my husband smokes. I'm going to send him in there. He loves to smokes. Yeah, I got to get him to stop smoking. So I can't deal with it anymore. I'm going to send him in there. It's not going to work. If he doesn't want to stop, it's not going to work, right?
That's absolutely correct. I mean, there's a chance that it could, and it does, again, it is a very interesting, kind of variance to what can happen. That's also the art of it. It is a mastery, and there are folks who figure out certain codes, but again, going back to integrity, and that person also needs to know that they feel trust with you, that they connect with you, because it is a very vulnerable state to access with somebody else and sometimes by yourself, even.
Hmm. I never thought of it that way. You definitely are vulnerable. When I did hypnotherapy, and it was all virtual, like we're doing here today, it got emotional. Went back to my childhood, which is usually the place you got to go because that's where a lot of things may have happened. My childhood was fine, just the stuff we all deal with. But I got emotional, so I guess maybe be prepared for that. Let's move from hypnotherapy to past life regression. Now, many of us have a view of that using those words. How would you explain it?
So it is a form of induction, which is a term used for hypnotherapy, where you are prompted to again relax your frontal thinking and to become vulnerable to that zone out state, to that receptive, relaxed state that, very few of us actually go there that often, perhaps in our sleep. And so that will be a little bit more organized in that there will be something to visit and to explore for that person personally through emotional and kinetic connection of the suggestion. So let's say that somebody has a phobia of flying, then we would prompt them to visit their earliest memory of that. And that becomes a whole beautiful process of its own that the client goes through, and often they experience these profound moments in real time, and they release that experience, and it changes the way that they conduct themselves gradually afterwards. So it's very profound and speedy.
Did you identify that you had past lives?
I did, yes. Deja vu was sort of a nudge or a clue for me that it was possible. Um, And, there are other realms that we visit and that we seem to have some kind of a recall in that does have significance to the way that we feel. So it's a really adventurous and curious experience. And I think it's just one of the most wonderful ways to deal with anything that's very deep rooted.
So you would say that a lot of what we deal with potentially nowadays, things that are limiting us, holding us back, came from a past life.
Um, Sometimes I think that there's probably other truths about that as well. For the purpose of organizing and focusing and maximizing what you can do with, a lot of this very esoteric approach, it's probably best to keep it simple.
I want to share with you and your feedback on a past life. I have an affinity for the 1800s. I don't know what it is. I love looking at photographs right when photography got going. Call it the 1850s, 60s, around there. I could look at pictures of around that period of people's clothes, and I'm fascinated. Like, how did they even do that without, today, of course, machines, whatever. I'm very, it just, I love the simpler way of life when there was a little bit of technology. And I later learned, this is actually within the last year, somebody traced back my genealogy, and it turns out that my father's father's father, I believe, came from Lithuania. Didn't even know I was Lithuanian. Ancestry.com confirmed that. And he was a tailor, and he would make clothes, and he worked his butt off. And he came from that country to New York City, became a tailor there, and was able to buy a place and support his family, and did fairly well. That I found that out after, I talked about loving that period and the clothes and just how they did it. It's not even just about the fashion, it's how they did it. Do you think that I may have been part of a past life in that period just because it resonates so much with me?
It makes sense to me, and maybe that's very simplistic. Maybe it's very far-fetched. Again, how to measure these things is the question. I would think that if you have a response, a very strong nervous system, sympathetic system response to the images or the evocations of the design or the sense of things, then very likely it's memorable for you in some way.
Hmm. I don't know. Time to book a session with Tatiana and let's go back. Um, how did this all happen for you? How did you go down this road of energy healing and all of these modalities?
Well, I guess I was always drawn to the other side. Even as a child, I was always just sort of fascinated with spirits and sort of the whole esoteric metaphysical reality of things. But I was also drawn to many other things. So I kind of explored, different modalities, and then I began to realize that I was very aware and sensitive, and um, helping people is something that is really happy for me and important to me. So, out of all the different trails that I took, this felt correct, and things kind of clicked into place once I gave up other aspirations that didn't seem to be as consistent for me. And this just felt correct, and it's still correct, and I'm so grateful.
Wow. You have also some mediumship ability, right? Clairvoyant
Yes.
ability as well. It's defined in many different ways. How would you define those abilities or gifts? Some call them that.
So it's really amazing. There are so many different types of people, and their particular signature of reading energy from where, what, why, how. And there are many terms for being a sensitive. A psychic is someone that can predict a certain way from your energy. A clairvoyant is someone who might see things more. A clairaudient might hear things. A medium tends to connect with uh, those that have passed over, and that particular spectrum, light spectrum or lack of light spectrum. And that's a little bit more sensitive and it's a little bit more physical. And what else is there? What other terms are there? And there are channelers, and they also download information in a different way. It's more of a stream. Um, People read tea leaves, they read beans. I mean, there are so many ways to connect with that kind of extra sensory information that can inform. If it's done in the right way, it can really um, open up open things up for people in a different way because they get to see something different about what they're going through. So that's what I would say about that.
Hmm. Do you see things? Do you hear things? Do you feel things?
I definitely do. Not all the time. Some days are a little busier than others. And I think, but I know that um, being this sensitive, and a lot of us are, that it also goes in its own cycles. Sometimes it's, very sharp. Sometimes it's a little, slower, or it wants to turn off. So, yeah, it's a very interesting adjunct.
I want to talk about the workplace. Now, a lot goes on in the workplace. There's different personalities, different energies that we all need to deal with. And that's essentially what we're talking about here. Energy is everywhere. We're energy. I'm a certain vibration. You are the chair we're sitting in. Another type of vibration. It harnesses energy, but certainly we spend so much time at work. What do you think would improve the work environment in this culture at this point in time?
So, well, a lot of the work environment is going home and working from home and interfacing with people on screens
Sure.
or phones. So that's one thing. But I think, there's so much change going on around us. It's overwhelming for everybody on every level. And I think that some of the very primal things that we experience as humans can be agitated more because things are a lot more ambiguous. But also that, there are some unhealed aspects as a species that, we struggle with. For example, whether we're good enough
Mm.
or
Which, by the
whether that.
way, I don't mean to cut you off, but our in our society, that's probably the number one thing. If you ask any coach, any therapist, we all walk around with one shape or form of feeling that we're not good enough, and it basically comes from childhood situations, right?
Definitely, definitely. Or the way that we continue when we come into this carnation and that it's unfinished, you know. Um, but yes, the uh, the protocol for this kind of stuff is it's very intense. I mean, we feel so intensely around each other, and in a workplace it's very competitive. It's very much about being thrown together with other people and trying to make it work because you have to and we're told to. And so there are a lot of things that occur, very intense feelings of again, am I good enough? Am I lovable?
Hmm.
Um, do I belong here? But also, edgier stuff like jealousy and, greed. The Native Americans speak about how jealousy and greed are some of the most profoundly damaging aspirations or connections to have socially. And, some of these can be pretty lethal if they're not kept in check. And, we're all doing our best here. This is not an easy place. But I hope that, these are things that we can learn how to monitor in some way a little bit better.
How does somebody work with you, Tatiana? Let's say this is resonating. They maybe they do know that they've got some stuff that they need to heal from. Maybe it's a past trauma. They reach out to you, and how does the whole process work?
So again, we would assess what it is that they're interested in tackling. And we determine, what speed, what direction, what outcome. And so then we would basically get right down to the nitty-gritty and figure out what is triggering this person. And are they more emotional? Are they more cerebral? And what would be the most positive fit for encountering some of the stuff that they want to encounter? And so we would have a discussion and an interview and, just check in that we're a good fit. And then we would go from there. And basically, the process is its own unique unfoldment, and it's personal to the client.
Yeah, one size doesn't fit all. We all have different things we're going through. You
Right.
identify what's going to work best. What's your website?
It's artofdivinemystery.com.
Interesting title. Life is a mystery now, isn't it?
It sure is.
Do you feel, that being said, do you feel that there are no coincidences in life? Things are happening for a reason.
Um, I have struggled with that one at times, but then eventually, yes, I do believe that it does return to that philosophy.
Yeah, and we may never know the answer, but then again, sometimes things happen, and then you look back and you say, "Oh, well, if that didn't happen, then this wouldn't have happened, then that wouldn't have happened." Um, it's fascinating. It is a mystery for sure. Wonderful talking with you, and thanks for the details on the past life regression. All of this, by the way, can be done virtually, correct?
Correct.
Wonderful.
Or by phone as well.
Yep,
Yes.
exactly. Tatiana, thanks for being here today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.